Hello everyone and welcome to the Bookmark. My name is Kayla and today we are going to be doing our book review on Little Women. I have the book right here. I got this copy from one of my friends when she went to New York City. It's so pretty. Like, look at this. I have better I have better pictures of it that I'm going to be posting on the Bookmark's Instagram, so go follow our Instagram page. You'll find our account name in the description below. Yeah, so this book, it looks pretty big, but I guarantee you this book is pretty short compared to normal books books are. So yeah, that's why it looks so big, and the text in this book is kind of big too. So yeah, this book is actually not that long. So if you are thinking about reading Little Women, don't be scared. It's not that long of a book. It's actually pretty easy to get through. So we're gonna get to it. So Little Women was authored by Louisa May Alcott. And this book came out in the 19th century, so it's a little old at this point. It is considered a classics book. I will say that among classic books, I think a lot of people think of Jane Austen or Charles Dickinson, and although yes, this book is in that realm, it's so much easier to read and grasp what is going on. It doesn't feel like there's all these words and the sentence structures don't make sense to modern day audiences. So it's actually pretty easy to get through. The cool thing about, so a little overview about Little Women in general, is that it is kind of believed that Little Women, actually I think it's more than confirmed at this point, that Little Women is actually describing Louisa May Alcott's home life. Her mom, the mom character in this book, is what is categorizing what her mom was like, and so on and so forth. And Louisa is actually Jo. I'm not too sure who's Jo on this cover. I want to say that this is Jo, only because Amy is considered to have blonde hair, and then Meg is the one with brown hair, and this looks like what Beth is kind of described as. I don't know. Y'all can tell me what you think in the comments below. But yeah, so what's pretty cool is that Little Women actually describes the four main characters, which I just said was Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. They are the four March sisters. There you go. They're the four sisters in this book, and they are the book kind of highlights each of them at different points. Overall, it seems as if the book is kind of from the perspective of Jo most of the time, but then at some points it's actually more of a third person, where it seems like someone is looking in on the life of these girls. And yeah, and so this book is pretty cool because it describes a lot about what's happening in the life in the 19th century America, actually. And this book takes place presumably right after, during, but then right after the Civil War. So it mentions that there are that their father is out at war, and he is helping, I believe he's a chaplain in the war at this point, because they do say that he's a preacher, that's his normal day-to-day job. And that's kind of what's going on in the background. There's not a lot of mentioning about the war, except that the girls do mention about how there are several families around them that they don't have enough food, or the wife of the family is no longer supported by the husband because he died in the war. So there's little mentionings in there, which I think is pretty cool, and it gives another overview of what happened in the Civil War. Not so much the actual wars and battles, but more how that looked like for the home life, for the people who were left behind. So I think that book, I think that was like a little added bonus that I don't think was like intentional, but it's pretty cool. So these characters and the storyline that happens in Little Women is actually it's fictional, although the characters, their personalities and their characteristics are based on Louisa May Alcott's actual family. So just make sure you get that distinction there. This isn't like technically an autobiography. This is still very much like a work of fiction. And yeah, so without getting into any spoilers, because this book review is non-spoiler, so if you gotten this far in the book review, and I did not say it in the beginning, but if you are really wanting to know what this book is about, because it isn't like this book is anywhere on Book Talk or anything like that. This is like a book that has been out for a while, and I honestly haven't seen a lot of like classics book reviews. They're kind of like here and there, as people in the booktube community have gotten to review these books. But yeah, this one's actually, I really liked Little Women, for the sake of like the little like shenanigans that would happen between the girls. I really liked their bond with each other as well. Like they all had different personalities that all complemented each other. And I personally, I don't know, right now, I still don't have like a favorite character. I know most people like root for Jo because Jo is like the modern day equivalent of like a feminist, to say, and like Meg follows like the more traditional path, as well as Amy's like more focused on like trying to marry rich. And Beth is like more of a homebody. So I feel like most people try to champion Jo above anyone else. But I don't know. I kind of really like the other girls too equally. And I'm just like, well, like they all had their faults and their quirks and everything that I just really liked about them. And I think that's like the cool thing about this book, is that the characters themselves are very likable. Like even when they mess up, or when they like when they're much younger, when they get into like more mischief and everything, you can't help but still really like these characters. So I think that's like a really cool part about this book in particular. The book, like I said, I mean, my copy looks ginormous, but it's honestly not that long of a book. You can get through it pretty easily. I mean, the stories keep you captivated enough that you're just like, okay, I want to read more and more and more. Especially when you start reading about Laurie and Jo, and I should say that Laurie is actually the main male character in this book. He becomes he becomes friends with Jo first, but he actually ends up living next door from the family with his grandfather. Yes, his grandfather, in his like really big house. And since he's an only child, he's the only child in that home, he often plays with the sisters, and so they've all developed like a relationship with him. I should say that what's pretty cool is that this book like first positions him as like as a friend, and that's pretty much his role in like with the sisters, until like other things happen in the book, but that's for when you read. You can see what happens. I mean, there's also like several movies out there of Little Women, so if you didn't want to read the book, you could also watch the movies, but I highly recommend the book, because after reading the book, I then went to go watch some movies, like some of the adaptations of Little Women, especially like the most recent one with that was made by Greta Gerwig. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. I don't think that's how, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, so there's like, it doesn't matter like how much longer these movies are separated. There's even one that I watched that was more like a limited series. I think it was done by PBS, I think. But even then, like, it still doesn't capture like all the little nuanced stories that happen in the book. It sometimes doesn't capture the exact like inflections and the attitudes of the girls. It's just like, if you want to read how they are with each other and that dynamic between each other, you really have to read the book. I think the book so far, to me, is like the only thing that does it justice for its own stories. Yeah. And there's a lot of characters that are introduced in this book that bring out kind of like the good and the bad between these characters. I think that's pretty interesting, is that each character kind of gets their own moment to shine. So you're not going to be, if you don't really like Meg, you are going to find like there's going to be more stories about Joe, and vice versa. Like, if you're not really like vibing with Joe's story, you want another story, there's like the other two girls, Amy and Beth, they kind of rotate around. And I think that's one of the cooler parts about this book, is that you can see all these, like all their perspectives. And it's not like each chapter is specifically like labeled for, oh, this is Joe's chapter. Sometimes within chapters, the perspectives change within there, or at least like who the narrator is talking about changes in the chapter. But promise you, it is not that hard to navigate what is going on. Sometimes I did have to like kind of stop and go back a page and then like catch on to what was really going on. But for the most part, the wording, the phrasing of the sentences, they're all pretty much to where it's like modern day audiences, so like us, don't feel like it's like you're going through a whole bunch of like jargon that was used in the 19th century. It also helps that if you have an I don't recommend abridged versions, because they cut off a lot of the cooler like little small stories here and there, but you can also find like a Sparks Note edition. There are some that are also like they're made specifically for like middle school age kids, although this book, I wouldn't say is actually, I wouldn't it's more like a YA type of book. It's definitely not any like adult, like higher level thinking, not really much of that. I mean, it's pretty, I would say it is more YA. Something that I thought was pretty cool that was brought up was when this book first came out, it was kind of, the book was actually given to boys, and men read the book too and engaged with what was going on in the book. And it wasn't until about the end of the 20th century that people really thought that this book was only for women, that it talks about women's problems. Yes, it does. But it talks about women's problems, and only women could understand the struggle that happened. And it's like, no, that's really not what this book kind of entails. And I even felt that as if like if a guy had read the book, they still would enjoy it too, because there's also discussions that happen with Lori and with John, which is Meg's husband. There's like several male characters that happen throughout the book, that come in throughout the book, I should say, that do bring in this like aspect where it's, now you're thinking of more of this is a community book where it's not geared, I mean, the title might suggest that it's for little women, but it definitely is not a book just for girls. So this may seem a little controversial now, but I mean, I would highly recommend that if you are a guy and you're thinking about reading into more classics, and you've heard of Little Women coming up here and there, especially because of some other more recent movie adaptations of the book, I would definitely still read it, because you are not going to find that you can't relate to it. In fact, I think you could even sympathize with the girls in the book, and you can kind of feel like, oh, like I'm realizing like, okay, what the guys are doing in the book, you're not like, oh, now I'm like, okay, well, that's what girls, and probably even girls today, still react in that way. So I think it's good for both parts, because even I was like, oh, so because I would get some like in the book you actually get some little, not as many perspectives on the male characters, but sometimes you do. And I was just like, whoa, like that like dynamic and that relationship, like that's how it looks like or manifests in his point of view. And yeah, that's why I think it's really good. I think it's really well written too. And I definitely say that you should read the book. It was honestly a book that was my friend who actually got me this book. She kept trying to get me to read it, and I was just like, I don't know. And when I read it, I honestly am so glad that I did, because it is such a good book. It's one of those books, I think, and this is actually kind of weird for me to say, I think it's one of those books that at some point in the future I would want to reread it. If you don't know me, I absolutely, like, if I have read a book and if it's like, it could even be like a really good book that I really loved, and I would not want to read it again, because I would just spoil the whole thing for myself all over again. Because I would never be able to simulate that first time reading it. But there are some books that I just like, I have to reread it because of the details, the storyline, the writing for it and everything. And I think that Little Women is going to be one of those books that's going to be sitting on my shelf forever, and I'm probably going to get I actually found that I have an abridged version of this book, and I had read it when I was much younger and didn't realize I had read it. But I'm really glad now I have this full version of it, and maybe even try to get the more special edition copies, because they come out so pretty sometimes. But yeah, so anyways, tell me what you think. What are your thoughts? Do you think you're gonna grab the book or not? Definitely let us know if you're more into classics. I have been reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I mean, you can kind of guess when the time of this video gets posted. Yes, slightly influenced by the new season of Bridgerton. Mostly because I was just like, well, I can read Bridgerton or I can read Jane Austen, where there's a lot of inspiration from. So I decided to go ahead and read Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, because I have that book already. Really liking how it's going so far. But yeah, let us know if you want more classics, since those don't typically get reviewed here on many booktubers. Yeah, and hopefully Michael can do a video book review next week. I don't know. I'll talk to him on that. But for now, you'll always see me here doing the book reviews on this channel, and we typically post at least once a week. Yeah, and if you want to see more of us on a more daily, you want to hear about our reviews and what we're thinking about books and what books we're reading and here at the Bookmark, and you want to hear on a more daily basis, go and follow us on our Instagram, which will be in the description below. And there we're always posting on our stories, and we're trying to get people to engage in a more bookish community. So yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Bye.